Welcome back, folks, for a new episode of Leaked. And today we'll cover the Kirovets-1, which is the IS-3 prototype. Now this is going to be a premium tier 8 Russian heavy tank. How many premium Russian heavy tanks are there? Like 12? So let's count. The KV-220-2, the Churchill Mark III, the Object 244, the IS-2 Berlin, the IS-5, IS-6, KV-5, Krivslavsky's KV-4, the KV-4 KTTS does not count. That's a tank destroyer, even though it's a heavy tank, so technicalities. The Object 260, the Object 777, Mark number 2, or model number 2, the IS-3A, and the Kirovets-1. That's 12. That's 12 premium heavy tanks for a few handful of Russian heavy tank crews. So you can train your heavy tank crews a lot with your daily doubles or whatever. But holy crap, give us something new like Polish tanks, Hungarian tanks, Chinese, Japanese tank destroyers. But let's have another premium Russian heavy tank, why not? So a lot of players complain that this is just a 112 for the Russians. Now technically, historically, the 112 is a blueprint tank designed to fight the IS-3 and IS-8, also called the T-10. But this is a prototype to the IS-3, so there is a time difference. So this actually precedes the 112. So small technicalities, but whatever. And here's the history about this vehicle. So this is a prototype to the IS-3, hence the name. So blah blah blah, you already know. So armor features a little bit better than the IS-2, has the D25T, so you know, all the good stuff. Now before 1945 and the finalization of the real IS-3 with the ChKZ pike nose, this tank was actually called the Kirovets-1, IS-3 model number A. So this is technically the early models of the IS-3. Now rarely the current version, the current famous ChKZ pike nose version of the IS-3 are sometimes called the Kirovets-1. So both vehicles are intertwined sometimes. So small fun fact. Now designs of the Kirovets-1 are from the Russian words, the Chelyabinsk plant. So there were two plants that were competing against each other for a design of the IS-3. So one was the Chelyabinsk plant, the other one was Plant No.100. So these two plants were designing a successor to the IS-2. So one came up with the Kirovets-1, and the other one came up with a pike nose shape hull armor with the IS turret. So they were playing around with it. The Kirovets-1 were based on the analysis of the Object 244, 245, and 248. It has a better engine than the initial variant, so there were two prototypes for the Kirovets-1, and it never saw action because it's a prototype tank. So here are the pictures of the original Kirovets-1. So here is a history or timeline of pre-IS-3 era. So in 1943, after successful mounting of the 85mm onto the T-34, becoming T-34-85s, putting the 85mm on IS chassis with the IS-85 is basically superfluous because you already have the gun, the firepower, on a medium tank. What's the point of putting it on the slower, larger, heavy tank with the same firepower? So, superfluous idea. Basically the same concept or same problem with the T-34-76 against KB-1s. You already have the same gun on the T-34. Why put it on a heavy tank? So they wanted a bigger gun, and they mounted the 122 A19 onto the IS-122 and mounted a D10 100mm on the IS-100. So they tested two guns on the IS chassis. They like the 122 because they have more ammo for the gun and the high explosive shells are better against fortifications. So the D10 100mm was relatively new and not enough ammo for the gun, so they chose the bigger gun and they placed it A19 onto the IS chassis, and they became the initial models of the IS-2. Later on, they modify it by changing the step armor. So you know the step armor on the IS. They modify it into a flat plate and put the D25T instead of the A19 in, and that became the IS-2 model 1944. So yeah, history you can read. So yeah, that's the IS-2 history. And afterwards, during 1944, in the spring, two plants were competing against each other for design to replace the IS-2, basically a prototype to the IS-3. The CB pilot plant number 100, so plant number 100, was designing a pike-shaped nose hull armor with a IS turret, I believe. I have no pictures of this vehicle, but trust me, it exists. And Chelyabinsk plant, Kirov plant, designed the Kirovets-1. So finally, the experts from the Central Research Institute in NKTP combined the pike nose from Plant 100 and the Kirovets-1's turret and forming the IS-3 that you know. So basically the stock IS-3 with the Kirovets turret. So that's the birth of the IS-3 Object 703. Now there is IS-3 Object 244. So there's two IS-3s technically, but you already know the Object 244, which is IS prototype-ish. It's not really a prototype. It's IS with a longer barrel, 85 millimeter. But I call it the IS prototype because it's forming into the IS-2. So stuff happens. So Russian tanks, a lot of competitions and stuff. So alright, so that's the full production of the IS-3 series. So the IS-3 is a combination of the Kirovets-1's turret and the pike-shaped hull armor from the Plant number 100's design prototype. Cannot find a picture of it, but just trust me on it. So, history. So interesting, but I keep messing it up. Alright, so as you can see, there's the timeline. You have the KV-85, which became or redesigned into the IS-85. The 85 millimeter was then put onto the T-34-85, and this vehicle became superfluous. So then came the Object 703, which is right here. So they put the larger barrel gun, yada yada yada. So then came the T-10 heavy tank. So design history. You can see where the progression of these vehicles came from, but it's basically step armor into slope armor into hemispherical turrets into T-54s and stuff. So yeah, design process over a few decades. Alright, so here is the Kirovets-1. Now, very importantly, I analyzed this vehicle, and from the historical documents of this vehicle, you can see that there's no rivets or bolts on top of the turret. So, as you can see, there are no bolts right here for the gun access port. This should be a gun access port, but there's no bolts. So, I looked this up, and it turns out that they do not have the gun access port for the early models of the IS-3. So Kirovets-1 does not have this weak spot on top of the turret. So this is, wait, where's my mouse? This is actually 50 millimeters of armor rather than 20 millimeters. So this is not really a weak spot, technically. So you cannot overmatch the armor on top of the turret, like with the IS-3. So I learned a little bit. Interesting enough, but this is the historical early turrets of the IS-3, so it doesn't have the weak gun access port. It's a decent looking tank. I mean, yeah, it's a 112 for the Russians. So the D-25T, yada yada yada, Russian tank. What's disappointing about this tank model is, where's the Dushka? Right here, the ChKZ. The giant 12.9 millimeter machine gun for anti-aircraft purposes. But yeah, no Dushka. But yeah, it's basically IS-3 prototype. So enough said. But I mean, it's all right. design of this vehicle is based off the T-34s, because the T-34s were pretty good because you're zerging people down with T-34 85s, and design of the vehicle is crazy good. Slope armor, it's fast, has good punching power. What could you ask for? Yeah. So here are the early models of the Kirovets-1. So no texture yet. And they put in some texture, I guess, right here with the cables and stuff. And here's a better screenshot of this vehicle with texture now. So yeah, it's not that bad looking of a vehicle. And notice the lack of a gun access port on top of the turret. So that's not really a weak spot anymore. But you do have a more prominent lip on the cupolas. So this little bulge is a little bit more significant, and therefore a weak spot than the gun access port. But it's a still small weak spot. Whatever. And here are the collision models of this vehicle. As you can see, the frontal plate is 120 millimeters. It's sloped around 35 to 40-ish degree angle. I cannot tell from the pictures, but it's about 35 to 40-ish. So about 187 to 210-ish millimeters effective, which is pretty decent for a tier 8 heavy tank. The lower plate is 100 millimeters at 35 degrees, so about 174, which is pretty good. And you're supposed to angle this vehicle at about 40-ish degrees, side scraping, so the upper plate, the lower plate will become better, hopefully. The side armor is 100 millimeters above the tracks, 110 below. You do have space armor, about 30 millimeters, so side scraping with this vehicle is very good, space armor and whatnot. The rear is 60 millimeters at 45 degrees, so 85-ish. Rear of the turret is pretty decent, so it's a rear of the turret. But yeah, armor-wise, it's fair, so Russian. And here are the main stats for this vehicle. It's going to be a premium tier 8 Russian heavy tank, so as usual. Now there should be a crew of 4. They did not release this info, but I believe historically that this is going to be a 4-man crew, not like the 3-man crew on the IS-3A. So it has normal matchmaking, will cost you around 12,000 gold. So it's a tier 8 premium heavy tank. Obviously it will cost a lot of gold. So it has 1,550 hit points, which is average, but not that bad. Engine power is 520, like the IS-3A. Weighs about 46 tons with equipments. Power to weight ratio is 10.95. It's almost the same as the IS-3A, which is below average, but it's alright, I guess. It's the same engine with about the same weight as the IS-3A, so the horsepower per ton ratio is the IS-3A is 10.91, I believe, so this is in the same ballpark. It's in the same freaking base. Alright, top speed is 42 kilometers per hour, which is pretty good, above average. Reverse is 20. Hull traverse is average, 26 degrees per second. Turret traverse is average, 25 degrees per second, but better than the IS-3A, which is 22, I believe. Terrain resistance is very good for a heavy tank, 0.959 for hard, 1.055 for medium, and 1.918. So that's very good for a heavy tank. That's decent. That's actually better than some of the tier 8 medium tanks. So yeah, that's pretty good. View range is Russian, 360 meters. It's 10 more meters than the IS-3 and the IS-3A and the KV-5. So I cannot complain. How much view range does the IS-5 have? 350? I don't know, but yeah, 360 is slightly better. Now the radio is 440 meters. So is that the same as the other Russian heavy tanks at tier 8? No, it's the same as tier 7 Russian heavy tanks, or tier 6, but yeah, that radio is crap. So hull armor is 120 at the front, 100 at the sides, and 60 at the rear. Turret armor is 175 at the front, 125 at the sides, and 110 at the rear. The gun is the D25T A, So modified with the APCR shell, 122mm. It's the same gun that's on the IS-3, on the IS-5. So the stats are pretty much the same. Now, there's a slight difference in DPM, but that's pretty much it. So penetration is top-notch. Same goes for the heat shield, the gold heat shield. And the damage is above average. Rate of fire is about 5 rounds per minute with the rammer. DPM is about 2,100 or so, and vents. So yeah, it's alright. Reloads every 12 seconds ish. With RAM, I'm still trying to calculate how long is the rammer and the vents going to shave off, but it's about 11.9 seconds. No. Yeah, 11.7 seconds, I believe. My math sucks. Accuracy is 0.432, which is Russian. Aim time is 3.16 seconds. That's already calculated from the bonus from the commander. So 3.16 seconds. Originally it was 3.3 seconds. So yeah, Russian. Gun depression is 5 degrees, and there's no elevation value for the gun elevation. And technically, it should be the same as the stock turret on the IS-3, which has 23 degrees of elevation. So that has to be confirmed, but I'm guessing 23 degrees, like the stock turret on the IS-3. So you can see with the tank inspector that the stock turret on the IS-3 is called the Kirovets-1. So Easter egg, oh, it's not really an Easter egg, but small fun fact. And there's no gun access port weak spot on top of the turret. So there are no rivets right here to show that you can open this up and access the gun. So yeah, it's a flat, well, there are plates now, but it's 50mm right here. As you can see, it's 50. So this is thicker than the top turret, which is 20. So basically, you cannot overmatch the stock turret's gun access port, but there are no rivets on the Kirovets-1. So this turret is a little bit different, surprisingly, but it's supposed to be the same turret. And the gun elevation on this turret is 23 degrees. So, alright. And, so final thoughts and opinions. It's basically an IS-3A with 4 crew slots and a different armor layout. So strengths of this vehicle is the penetration, the alpha, and terrain resistance are pretty good. The weakness is horsepower per ton ratio. So it's basically the same mobility as the IS-3A. The accuracy, aim time, and gun depression are Russian. So if you're not used to Russian vehicles or Russian heavy tanks with this gun handling, then why are you buying a Russian premium heavy tank? So kind of odd. And the view range and radio range are Russian, but the radio range is kind of bad, only 440 meters. So yeah. The main difference between the Kirovets-1 and the IS-3A is you're basically trading radio range and some DPM for the removal of the gun access port weak spot on top of the turret, slightly better view range, and hopefully the loader spot for the crew, so you can train your loader with safe stowage and whatnot and repairs. So is it worth it? The IS-3A is pretty good at making credits. I have one, and this should be just as great. The mobility is alright, but it's fine. The loader spot is pretty important, and it's missing on the IS-3A, so this is a buff because you have to train safe stowage, and safe stowage is pretty important for Russian tanks. It's actually important for all tanks, but more important on Russian tanks. The armor might be more reliable than the IS-3's ChKZ pike nose, so you can't angle this vehicle's armor, whereas if you angle the IS-3A or the IS-3, that negates the pike nose effectiveness, right? So the armor might be a little bit more reliable because you can't just side scrape. Now, needs to confirm, but there are no bolts or rivets on top of the turret, so this is basically the infamous weak gun access port on top of the IS-3, and it looks like to be 50mm on the Kirovets-1. So this might not be the weak spot that's infamous with IS-3s. So hopefully it's not. And APCR shells might troll because APCR shells have only 2 degrees of gun normalization or gun angle normalization. So it negates 2 degrees of armor, whereas AP shells negates 5 degrees, so a little bit more. So APCR shell might hit Type 59 frontal upper plate and bounce, even though it has less effective armor. So trolling APCR shell. And aesthetically, this vehicle is kind of bland. Where is the Dushka, the 12.9mm machine gun on top of the turret? Where is it? I like the Dushka. Give me the Dushka. It has the log, so it passed as a Russian tank, but where's the fuel tanks, the tow cables, the toolboxes, the tools? So yeah, it's not that pretty of a tank. Aesthetically pleasing, I guess. So and that's pretty much it. So thank you guys for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.